Ever wonder why your brain tends to favor certain types of information over others? This is due to a fascinating phenomenon known as cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are essentially mental shortcuts or default settings our brains use to speed up decision-making. Think of them like the autocorrect feature on your smartphone, making quick, on-the-fly corrections as you type. However, just like autocorrect, these mental shortcuts don't always get it right. They can distort our perception of reality, leading to errors in judgment-flawed reasoning. From the way we remember events to how we evaluate risks and rewards, these biases silently shape our thoughts and decisions every single day. They're like invisible puppet masters, subtly pulling the strings of our mind, often without us even realizing it. But don't worry, we're all susceptible to them. It's part of being human. As we delve deeper into this topic, you'll soon realize that these biases are more common than you might think. If you're enjoying this insightful video, do us a favor and smash that like button and subscribe. It helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks, brainiacs! 3 of the most prevalent cognitive biases are confirmation bias, anchoring, and the availability heuristic. Diving right in, let's begin with confirmation bias. Have you ever found yourself drawn to information that seems to validate your existing beliefs or opinions? That's confirmation bias at work. It's a mental shortcut that leads us to lean into information that supports our preconceived notions and dismiss data that contradicts them. Think about how you interpret news stories or how you react to a debate on a topic you feel strongly about. Confirmation bias can cause us to overlook important information and make decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate data. Next, let's talk about anchoring. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a car. The seller throws out the first number and somehow that initial figure sticks in your mind. You find yourself basing your counteroffers around it, even if it's higher than you initially planned to spend. That's anchoring in action. It's the tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, the anchor, when making decisions. This bias can lead us to make skewed judgments, especially when the anchor is arbitrary or irrelevant. Finally, let's explore the availability heuristic. This bias is all about the power of immediacy. When asked to evaluate a specific topic, concept, or decision, we tend to rely on the examples that come to mind most readily. These examples might be influenced by recent news, dramatic events, or personal experiences. However, they may not be representative of the broader context or reality. The availability heuristic can lead us to overestimate the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind, leading to potentially flawed decisions. These biases are so deeply ingrained in our thinking that we often don't even realize they're influencing our decision-making process. As we navigate through life, it's critical to be aware of these biases and how they can shape our perspectives and choices. Cognitive biases aren't just theoretical concepts, they have real-world implications. Let's take a look at how these biases often sneak into our everyday lives. Confirmation bias, for instance, is commonly seen in the workplace. A manager might favor an employee whose ideas align with their own, disregarding other perspectives that could potentially be more beneficial for the team. Anchoring bias often shows up in negotiations or when making purchases. You may have noticed how the initial price offered for a product often influences your perception of subsequent prices, making them seem more or less reasonable. Lastly, the availability heuristic might affect our social interactions. For example, if a person has recently heard a lot about a certain topic, they might overestimate its prevalence or importance, leading to skewed judgments. Media consumption, too, isn't free from cognitive biases. The news we choose to consume often reinforces our existing beliefs, feeding into our confirmation bias. As you can see, these biases can greatly impact our judgments and decisions in all aspects of life. These biases can significantly affect our judgment, decision-making, and problem-solving skills. Cognitive biases, in essence, color our view of the world, subtly guiding us towards decisions that may not always be in our best interest. They're like invisible puppeteers, pulling the strings behind the scenes, leading us down paths we might not have chosen if we had all the information at hand. For instance, confirmation bias can make us favor information that supports our preconceptions, leading us to make decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate data. Similarly, anchoring can cause us to rely heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, which can lead to poor decisions if that anchor is misleading or irrelevant. And let's not forget about the availability heuristic, where we base our decisions on the information that's most readily available to us, even if it's not the most pertinent or accurate. These biases can significantly affect our judgment, decision-making, and problem-solving skills. Cognitive biases, in essence, color our view of the world, subtly guiding us towards decisions that may not always be in our best interest. They're like invisible puppeteers pulling the strings behind the scenes, leading us down paths we might not have chosen if we had all the information at hand. For instance, confirmation bias can make us favor information that supports our preconceptions, leading us to make decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate data. Similarly, anchoring can cause us to rely heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, which can lead to poor decisions if that anchor is misleading or irrelevant. And let's not forget about the availability heuristic, where we base our decisions on the information that's most readily available to us, even if it's not the most pertinent or accurate. Recognizing these biases is the first step towards making more accurate and effective decisions. How then can we mitigate the impact of these cognitive biases, you might ask? One effective strategy is to slow down our decision-making process. By taking the time to thoroughly analyze the situation at hand, we allow ourselves to consider all possible angles and outcomes, reducing the likelihood of bias creeping in. Another helpful tactic is seeking perspectives from others. As individuals, we each have our unique biases, but by incorporating diverse viewpoints, we can counterbalance these biases to reach a more balanced decision. Think of it as a cognitive checks and balances system. Lastly, simply being aware of common cognitive biases can go a long way. Knowledge is power, and by understanding how our brain can sometimes trick us, we can actively work to recognize and mitigate these influences. By being aware of these cognitive biases and actively working to mitigate their impact, we can improve our decision-making and problem-solving skills and ultimately make better choices.